What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how you can color grade in Premiere Pro 2024, and I'm going to show you the main method that I use. It's pretty much the same thing I did in the Vegas tutorials, except it's going to be slightly different because of the interface, and the tools are also a little bit different. Now, I want to go ahead and put out there that there's a difference between color correction and color grading. In my previous videos, I showed you how to do both, but in this one, I'm going to stick to telling you how to color grade because the clips that I've chosen to show you guys today are not clips that you can really correct. Color correction is if you have like a color checker, or if it's on your slate when you're shooting and it's got it on board, you can do it that way. You can hold up a paper card. But in my particular situation, it was the light was changing because it was a concert, so there was stage lights going everywhere. The light was changing consistently, so I'm just kind of set the temperature to 5,000 and just kind of let it be. Because whenever I was in the room, what I did is I watched the performance from the bands before the band I was hired to shoot, and I kind of matched by eye the color that was showing on my monitor versus the color I was seeing in the room, and 5,000 was the sweet spot for that. So that's how I did it. But of course, you can do that in software if you'd like, and I'll show you what happens if I try to do it in software, and you'll see why I don't do that. But without further delay, I'm going to get right into this video. So here's the two clips. I have an A cam, B cam setup for this one. So I have a Z cam E2C and a Z cam E2S6. I took notes, as you should if you are a colorist or a filmmaker and you know you're going to be editing. Your post-production team should always have these notes. I know the temperature was set to 5,000 Kelvin. I know the ISO was set to 800. That matters if you shoot RAW. I did not shoot RAW, so it doesn't matter too much, but I just like to put it down there for habit. The format, this is very, very important. So we have H.265 10-bit as the format on both of them, and then both of them were shot in Z-Log 2, which is our input color. So I'm going to go over here, and now we know we need to change the color space right off the bat, but we know both of them were shot in that color space. So there are certain settings that will go across the board, and then other settings and colors that you'll change according to shot. So let's say you've got an entire project that was shot in Z-Log 2. You don't have to individually go and add that in Premiere. You can just go ahead and right-click, click on an adjustment layer. I'm going to name this one tutorial. If you're not in this screen, you can go to Window, Workspaces, and Color, and you'll get here. Drag and drop that adjustment layer onto your clip, and like I said, there's general settings that we know we need to adjust, and there's a couple ways of doing it with Z-cams, but I'm going to do this in a way that any of you guys can do this if you're shooting Canon or Sony or whatever. Go to Input LUT, click on Browse, and then I will leave this LUT pack down in the description below. It's one that I like a lot because it actually accounts for exposure correction as well. So I'm going to choose the Panasonic V-Log to Rec. 709 because that's the one that's very, very close. Almost, you can't really differentiate between it, really. Panasonic V-Log and then Z-Log 2. So I'm going to choose that one, and our color space is now converted to Rec. 709. And that does it for both of our clips. Now we have to be careful and remember that we are editing on both clips right now. So I'm going to go over here and put some other general settings that I know I want. I know I want to have vignetting on both clips. A lot of people out there dislike vignetting, but I actually think it adds a bit of character to my footage, so I really like vignetting. And then I'm gonna go to creative. Now this is something that I know I would like to do in the end. Actually, I will wait until the end to show you that one. I'm going to click on the actual clip now, not the adjustment layer. So now we have Lumetri color on our actual clip, and you can verify that by looking in the effect controls. I'm going to go to Lumetri scopes, and I'm going to show you what happens. Obviously, we see she has a white shirt here, our person here. So if we go to basic correction, choose the white balance dropper pin thing. If we choose her shirt, this doesn't look correct at all. At least not in my opinion. This doesn't look right, especially having been there. This looks very green to me. That's why trying to correct it after the fact might not work the way that you might think it should or will. So that's why I personally choose not to do that. So that being said, gonna get straight to the actual grading process. So now our input LUT is saved correctly, and I believe that's the only setting that we changed other than vignetting. And then the other one I'll show you later. So for this, I'm going to go to color wheels and match, and I'm going to start actually grading the clip here with the color that I want. I typically go for warm in the highlights, but it'd make it a little bit more. I typically go for red in the midtones. Now, obviously, this depends, but this is generally my style. And then cool in the shadows. And I'm going to go to basic correction, and I'm going to add contrast. About right there should work. I'm going to bump that saturation up just slightly. I'm going to go to curves. Oh, looks like we already have our S curve here, so that's good. I guess I must have graded this before, but yeah, I was going to add an S curve. Okay, and up here is your highlights, and down here is your shadows. And the further you bring it up, the brighter it gets, and the more you bring it down, the darker it gets. Just keep that in mind for later on. Good. And then color wheels and match is where we want it already. Good. And now, obviously, that did not translate to our other clip, which is good. We wanted those settings to be very specific to this clip specifically, and our color so far looks absolutely amazing. Obviously, this looks overexposed on our left side, and if you actually look at our scope here, it is clipping. But this was by design, so it really depends. Whenever you're shooting, if you don't have a camera that's capable of such high dynamic range, and this particular camera is not that great with dynamic range, especially since I did not shoot RAW. I shot H.265, so the image is going to look like this. If you are shooting, make sure you shoot. If you're having a complex light scenario like this, you can do one of two things to remedy it. You can shoot on a better camera, rent one from a rental house or something. That way it's cheaper. If you can't buy one, just rent it. I know here in Kentucky we can actually rent RE cameras for about $400 a day, which is an absolute steal, by the way. So shout out to OHD Studios for that one. Make sure to check them out. They're very good. If you can't rent, then you can try and buy or lease or borrow from someone. It really depends. But if you just cannot choose a different camera to shoot on, then another thing you can do is choose what your subject is going to be and then expose for that. So I know that my subject here, as you can see by what's in focus, is going to be this young woman here, the young woman there, and just the general members of the audience. So as you can see, even with the changing light environment, I made sure to keep the exposure pretty good, as best as I could, at least on the faces here, so that we can see the enjoyment of the audience. Now, unfortunately, I got sprayed in the face with seltzer water, and my lens also had seltzer water put on it. You can actually see this guy right here putting more seltzer water on the fans as part of the show. So unfortunately, I did get this flaring that you see here, and that flaring is due to seltzer water on my lens, which was something that I couldn't correct right that moment, but I did correct later on. And then this is a different clip, so we're going to go ahead and start grading this one. I'm going to go ahead and raise, well, it's already raised about 0.5. I'm going to raise it up a whole stop, actually. I don't know if this is measured in stops or not, but I'm going to raise that. And then I'm going to go to curves. Looks like curves is already messed with, but I'm going to go ahead and change it. I'm going to lower the highlights, bring the shadows back up because I want to see the audience here. Good. So now we can see the audience. Even though it's dark, we can see the audience here. And this is right before they did a wall of death. So we want to be able to see them. We want to be able to capture that, obviously. So even though it's really dark in this room, we were actually able to, since we shot H.265, and it's at least a little bit better than H.264, we can still lower the exposure here, bring up the overall exposure just enough to be able to see all of them and whatnot, and just kind of go from there. So the exposure here looks good. What about color? We can go ahead and change the color if we'd like. With this one, I'm gonna go obviously for a warm feeling in the highlights, and red midtones. Bring it back down just a couple notches, and then make sure the shadows are nice and cool. Okay. And then for contrast, I think we're going to leave the contrast alone just because it's already dark enough. So maybe just a tad bit I can change it, but not by much. We'll change it to like 3. And now for the last tip, obviously both of these clips are color graded now to the best of our ability, and this is something I would sell, but I want to add a little bit of extra to it, right? So this is something that you can or don't have to do. You can or it's you do or don't. It's a style choice. It's up to you. Some people call this cheating. Me, I just think it's kind of creative, but what I like to do is go over to the creative tab, and you can use these if you want, or if you have dehancer, which I do happen to have dehancer, but I don't typically use it unless I'm shooting with the purpose of using dehancer, which we will go over in another tutorial. But for me, I'm going to choose a creative LUT, and I have magic bullet looks LUTs, so I'm going to choose this one. And obviously, whenever you apply it, it's going to look like this. It doesn't matter what LUT, if you already color grade your footage and then bring a LUT into the mix, LUTs are typically designed not just for color, but they also take in account the exposure settings that whoever generated the LUT used. So if somebody shot footage on a Sony camera and shot S-Log3 and you try and put that color LUT onto your Z-Log2 footage, it's not going to match, obviously, because they could have been shooting in a different scenario where they color graded their footage and the exposure was different, and then that setting gets applied here. So obviously that's why it looks absolutely crushed, and we can see in the preview here what it would look like without Lumetri color, what it would look like just to the clip itself, and then we can see what actually happens because of the other settings that we applied. And even if we turned off Lumetri color, obviously it still looks messed up just because it wasn't designed for it. But if we want to keep just the color, what I like to do is lower the intensity to 0 and then slowly creep up until it's to a spot that I like. And I think that right there is about good. And this is going to apply to both of our clips, as you can see. So now whenever we watch it back, looks really nice. Color looks very good. And then I'm going to warm it up because both of these clips are pretty cold. So I'm going to go to the temperature and I'm going to change that just a bit here. And that's what it actually should have been. Because obviously it originally did not look like 5,000 Kelvin at all. It looked more like, I don't know, something else. So we changed it, and now both clips, if we play it back, both clips look absolutely amazing, at least as best as we could get it. There's nothing we can really do about this side unless you duplicate the clip and then mask it out, but even then, that's more of a DaVinci Resolve kind of thing. Premiere Pro is not designed for advanced color grading. So if you are a colorist, you should not be using Premiere Pro. But if you're editing, client work and they want you to use Premiere or something, this is something that you can do. This tutorial should help you get by. And obviously this footage looks great. We can still see the audience here, and this is good footage. So the only thing so that's the end of the tutorial for your average users. If you are a Zcam user, I will quickly go over that tool just so that the Zcam people don't get left out. So I'm going to delete Lumetri color from all of these clips, or at least this one. I'll show you this one. So there's a tool down in the description below for you guys. It's the Z-Log color tool, and you can install it into Premiere or OFX, which is like Sony Vegas. But you can actually drag and drop the Z-Log color tool onto your adjustment layer. And as you can see, we've got a bunch of settings here. So we know that the input color space was Z-Log2, which is correct, but you can actually change this to anything else if you'd like, but I'm going to keep it as Z-Log2. And then I'm going to change the output color space to Rec 709. And I did not shoot in stage mode, but I should have. So you can actually change it from the scene mode from normal to stage, which is correct because I shot on or near stage. And I'm going to use saturation correction as well, because it looks a little bit wonky here, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and use saturation correction. The temperature was 6,500 according to this, but it was actually 5,000. I did not shoot raw, so it did not show up. But unfortunately, Zcam no longer supports actual Z raw. It's now just a compressed H.265 stream, unfortunately. So this would not show accurate regardless. But because we took notes, we know it's 6,500. It should be 5,000 instead of 6,500. So we have that. And now based on that, we can start the actual color grading process. So if we want to, we can go, actually, you can even change the look and feel to cool and neutral if you would like, but I don't want to do that personally. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go to basic correction. I'm going to add contrast by a lot. I'm going to add some saturation. I'm going to go to creative and I'm going to choose that same LUT from earlier that I mentioned. I'm going to go to color wheels and match, warm up the highlights, cool down the shadows. I'm going to leave the midtones alone. And of course, as mentioned before, vignette. And I'm going to go to curves as well, kind of brighten some things up there, which is a rough and dirty grade. I'm just kind of showing you the Z color tool, but obviously it looks great here. I would sell this footage in a heartbeat. This looks good, like good footage to me. And it's essentially very similar, almost the same exact result as we got before. And that will also transfer over to our other footage because we did it on an adjustment layer. I'm going to delete the metric color from underneath, but this is what it looks like with just the adjustment layer, which is why you should have the adjustment layer for basic settings and then change anything else on the actual clip itself. Now let's say you have this clip positioned in multiple places. Like let's say you already cut the clip, but it's the same shot. So for the concert, obviously this was the A cam. This cam was rolling throughout the entire time and it cuts back and forth between the B cam and the A cam. This shot was not moving. It was the same. So we know that the color is going to be the exact same all the way through. So if you are in a scenario where you've already cut or you have a post-production team and they already went through the cutting process, no color grading has been applied whatsoever, you know on this one shot you've got the color consistent, what you can do is actually select that clip and instead of going to here, which is the actual event in the timeline, you can actually click here on source and then do color grading at the source. And that way it will apply across the board. Now, if you're not going to use an adjustment layer, you can do this for your specific clip. Like you use the adjustment layer, obviously, to change the color log space to Rec 709. And now you can use this method if you want to adjust the clip across the board if it was already cut. But you should do I mean, it really depends if you want to do you typically want to do assembly, audio, captions, graphics, color, editing, effects. Like all of these things are actually put in order on purpose. This is very similar to DaVinci Resolve. These workspaces are very purposefully put in this way. So that way you have a post-production workflow. So you have assembly, work on audio, captions, and graphics, coloring, and then you do the editing, which is like the actual cutting and the fine tuning of things. So that's just kind of your post-production workflow for Premiere, but obviously it's up to you. And that's pretty much it for the color grading tutorial. I hope that you guys found it helpful. And if you did, make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or whatnot, feel free to use the comment section. I reply to all comments. So yeah, I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.